They only loved the version of you that kept quiet, the one who nodded, smiled, and never made waves. But the moment you said no, they vanished. That's not love. That's control. If your peace depends on pleasing them, you're not in a relationship. You're in a cage. Real connection doesn't crumble at the sound of boundaries. Say it with your chest. No, this isn't okay. Because if you lose them for being real, they were never yours anyway. They said they loved you, but only when you were quiet, only when you agreed, only when you nodded, smiled, and swallowed your truth just to keep the peace. They mistook your silence for harmony, but deep down, you weren't at peace. You were imprisoned. You weren't being loved. You were being controlled. If your loyalty requires silence, it's not love, it's submission. It begins subtly. They make small comments when you speak up. And maybe they call you too sensitive, too much, or say, you always want to argue. So you start holding back. You stop voicing your needs, your discomforts, your desires, not because you're okay, but because you're scared. Scared of the distance that might follow. Scared of the cold shoulder. Scared of losing them. That's not a relationship. That's emotional blackmail dressed up as love. The moment you realize you can't say no without punishment, you need to understand this truth. You're not in a partnership. You're in a power dynamic, one where your worth is based on how well you fit their mold, one where your needs come last or not at all. And what's worse, you begin to convince yourself this is normal, that maybe your silence is a small price to pay for being loved. But that's the trap. That's where the damage begins. Not when they hurt you, but when you start believing that your pain is acceptable, that your voice is the problem. That peace means never shaking the table, even when your soul is screaming. And yet, love doesn't feel like walking on eggshells. It doesn't feel like censoring your soul to keep someone around. Love holds space. Real love says, even if I don't agree, I still see you. I still choose you. I still respect you. If you can't be fully honest without fearing loss, then what you're clinging to isn't love. It's fear dressed as commitment. They loved your compliance, not your courage. They cherished your silence, not your strength. Because the moment you spoke up, the moment you said no, the mask slipped. You saw who they were, someone who wasn't there for you, but for the version of you they could control. This is how you lose yourself. Slowly, quietly, sacrificing piece after piece of your identity just to keep someone who only stays when it's easy for them. You silence your intuition. You abandon your boundaries. You shrink, all to avoid conflict, to avoid abandonment, to avoid rejection. But in doing so, you abandon yourself, and that's the deepest kind of loss there is. People often say, love is sacrifice. But what they forget to tell you is healthy love never requires the sacrifice of your soul. It never asks you to betray yourself just to be accepted. If someone only values you when you're silent, you're not being valued, you're being used. You weren't made to be quiet. You weren't born to be someone else's version of acceptable. Your voice matters. Your no is sacred. It sets the standard for how others are allowed to treat you. And if that scares them away, let them go. Because what you're losing isn't a partner, it's a prison. You need to hear this. You don't owe anyone your silence to keep their love. You don't owe anyone your discomfort so they can feel secure. The moment you feel like you have to betray yourself to keep someone, that's your sign. You're not being loved, you're being managed. Start paying attention to how people respond when you express discomfort. Watch what happens when you set a boundary. Do they lean in or do they shut down? Do they try to understand or do they manipulate? That reaction will tell you everything you need to know, not about your worth, but about their capacity to love you for real. And the truth is, the people who can't handle your no were never strong enough to handle your truth anyway. They didn't want a partner. They wanted a puppet. They didn't love you. They loved how easy it was to keep you quiet. But you're done being quiet now. You're done shrinking to be digestible. You're done mistaking fear for connection, because the moment you say, no more, is the moment you reclaim your freedom. It's the moment you take your power back. It's the moment you stop chasing love and start embodying it. So if your loyalty has ever cost you your voice, if your silence ever became the ticket to being enough, if you ever stayed just to avoid being alone, understand this: that wasn't love. That was survival. And you deserve more than survival. You deserve freedom, the kind that never requires silence as proof of devotion. They say real love stays. But what happens when the moment you speak up, when you finally find the courage to say, that hurts, or I don't like that, someone suddenly pulls away? What happens when your boundaries become a problem? When the word no shifts the entire energy in the room, that's not love being challenged. That's control being threatened. When you set a boundary and someone leaves, that is not rejection. That is revelation. That moment is a mirror, not a failure. Because boundaries don't push real people away. They expose the ones who never cared to begin with. It's easy to seem loyal, loving, and present when you're getting everything your way. It's easy to act kind when someone never challenges your comfort zone. But the real test of connection, of character, of care, comes when someone says, this is where my line is. The ones who flinch, disappear, or retaliate when you draw that line are not your people. They never were. They were only there as long as you were easy, agreeable, and quiet. Too many people confuse compliance with compatibility. They think if you go along with everything, you're so easy to love. But the moment you assert a need, express discomfort, or simply ask for space, the mask comes off. They weren't attached to you. They were attached to their ability to mold you. And when that mold breaks, when your self-respect rises, they fall away. And you grieve it. You call it loss. But it's actually the first step toward freedom. Because someone who truly sees you, truly values you, won't walk away the moment they can't get what they want. They won't vanish just because you said, this doesn't work for me. They'll pause. They'll listen. They'll lean in. Love is not afraid of boundaries. It honors them. Because boundaries don't create distance, they create clarity. And clarity always reveals who's real and who's only there for the version of you that never says no. So if someone left when you finally spoke up, don't take it as proof that you're unworthy. Take it as confirmation that your truth was too loud for the lie they were living. They didn't leave because you did something wrong. They left because they never intended to meet you in your full power. And I know that realization hurts because you probably thought they cared. You probably spent months or years editing yourself just to keep them close. You may have thought your silence was protecting the connection, but the connection was only ever real if it could survive your truth. and it couldn't. Here's the real love that evaporates when you get honest was never love. That was control wrapped in affection. That was manipulation wearing the mask of care. That was someone feeding on your need to be accepted. Until you started accepting yourself. You don't owe anyone yourself abandonment to earn closeness. You don't have to bleed emotionally just to keep someone comfortable. You are allowed to say, "This is what I need," and see who sticks around, because the right people, they won't punish you for protecting yourself. They won't disappear when you grow. They won't call you too much when you start taking up your rightful space. The moment you set a boundary, you change the dynamic. You stop playing the role. You become real. And real scares people who only know how to connect through control. But you weren't born to be molded. You weren't created to be anyone's emotional servant. You have a voice, a soul, and a self, and that deserves to be respected. So when they leave because of your boundary, let them. Don't chase. Don't beg. Don't try to prove your worth to someone who only loved your silence. Instead, thank the boundary. Because that line you drew, it didn't push them away. It just showed you who was never really there. Your boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. Doors that separate the real from the fake. The safe from the dangerous. The aligned from the performative. And every time someone walks out because you chose yourself, you're not losing love. You're clearing space for it. So speak your truth. Draw your lines. Let people reveal themselves. Because the ones who leave were never your tribe. They were just visitors who couldn't handle the full version of you. And now that you're standing in that version, unapologetic, clear, whole, you don't need them anyway. Not everyone will stay when you find your voice, but the ones who do. They're your people. They're your peace. And they're the proof that your boundaries didn't break love. They protected it. Love is supposed to feel safe. It's supposed to be the place where you can breathe, rest, and be seen. But when you're afraid to say no, when you're walking on emotional eggshells just to keep someone close, that's not love. That's fear. That's not freedom. That's captivity. And the truth is harsh but necessary. Love without freedom is just emotional imprisonment. It doesn't start with chains. It starts with small sacrifices. You cancel your plans because they seemed a little upset. You change how you dress because they made one sarcastic comment. You hide parts of your personality because you fear they'll call you too much. And before you know it, you're no longer living your life. You're managing theirs. You become a caretaker of their moods, their comfort, their expectations. You spend more energy predicting their reactions than expressing your truth. And slowly, you stop showing up as yourself, not because you want to change, but because you feel you have to. Because every no you withhold becomes another brick in the prison you're building around yourself. Real love should never make you question whether your boundaries will cost you someone's affection. You should never have to trade your voice for closeness. But when love is weaponized, when control hides behind compliments and guilt, your freedom becomes the currency they spend to feel secure. You're no longer loved. You're managed. The danger is most people don't even realize they're in emotional imprisonment until they try to break out. The moment you say, "I'm not okay with that," and suddenly the temperature shifts. Silence, guilt trips, withdrawal, maybe even rage. That's when you realize your love was conditional. It was accepted only when it stayed small, quiet, and agreeable. That's when you understand this was never about love. This was about power. When someone can't handle your no, what they're really saying is, I preferred you voiceless. They didn't sign up for you. They signed up for access, for control, for comfort. And now that your truth disrupts their grip, they act like you're the problem. They say you've changed. They say you're being selfish. But all you've really done is wake up. You see, emotional imprisonment doesn't always come with yelling or threats. Sometimes it comes with, I thought you loved me, or why are you making such a big deal out of this? It comes in the form of subtle punishments, a withdrawn tone, a lack of affection, a guilt-laced silence. It comes with conditions, love me like this, or I'm gone. But love is not a leash. Love does not hold you hostage to someone else's comfort zone. Love does not ask you to disappear in order to be desirable. You are not hard to love. You are just hard to manipulate. And that's a good thing. That's your strength, not your flaw. Freedom in love means you can speak your mind and still feel safe. It means your no is not a threat, but a truth. It means the relationship can stretch to hold both people's needs, not just one. And if it can't, then it's not love, it's control in disguise. People who love you for real will welcome your boundaries, not resist them. They will say, thank you for telling me. They will ask, what do you need? They will make room for your experience because they value the real you, not just the version that keeps them comfortable. So let this be your reminder. If you can't say no without fear of punishment, you are not free, you are trapped. And no matter how sweet the words, how passionate the kisses, how deep the history, if the price of love is your freedom, it's too damn high. You were not created to be someone's emotional puppet. You are not here to be agreeable at the cost of your soul. Your freedom is not optional, it is essential. And the moment you realize that, the moment you reclaim it, is the moment you start loving yourself in a way that changes everything. Because when you finally choose freedom over fear, when you choose honesty over harmony, when you choose self, respect over temporary connection, that's when you begin to heal. And yes, you might lose people when you do. You might watch them walk away because you're no longer easy to control. But you won't lose the people who matter. You won't lose the ones who see your freedom as a strength. You'll lose the chains, the weight, the constant self-abandonment. And in that space, you'll find peace. Real love does not ask you to be small. Real love does not fear your no. Real love wants you whole, not half. So speak, stand tall, set the boundary. Because love without freedom isn't love at all. It's a beautifully decorated cage. And you were never made to live behind bars. If your yes is expected, then your no becomes a threat. That's the hidden contract so many people enter without realizing it. A silent agreement that says, as long as you agree with me, validate me, and never challenge me, we're good. But the moment you break that rhythm, the moment you say, I don't agree, or that doesn't work for me, the energy changes, the warmth fades, the silence gets louder, and suddenly love starts to feel more like punishment than peace. When yes becomes the default, the only acceptable answer, then your no isn't just rejected, it's treated like rebellion, like betrayal, as if you've broken a sacred rule by simply honoring your own boundaries. And that's when you know You were never really in a relationship. You were in a role. One that demanded your agreement in exchange for closeness and your silence in exchange for survival. People who expect you to always say yes aren't looking for a partner. They're looking for control. They may not even realize it. They might tell themselves they love you. They may say they want you to be yourself, but the moment yourself says no, you find out what they really loved, your compliance. Think about it. How many times have you said yes when everything inside you screamed no? How many times have you smiled while your spirit was cracking under the weight of people pleasing? How many times have you said, "It's fine," just to keep the peace? That's not connection. That's survival mode. That's fear in disguise, and it runs deep. Maybe you were raised to believe that love is earned through sacrifice. Maybe you were taught that saying no makes you difficult, ungrateful, or selfish. So you kept saying yes. You kept swallowing your truth, not realizing that every time you did, you were disappearing a little more. But here's the truth most people never say out loud: a love that requires your silence isn't love. It's a performance, a dance where you're not allowed to miss a step. And when you finally do, when you finally assert yourself, the applause stops and the criticism begins. They say you've changed. They say you're being dramatic. They say you're making things harder than they need to be. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer easy to control. And that's where your power is. Your no is your rebellion against every moment you were made to feel small. It's a declaration that says, I exist. I matter. I'm not here to be consumed. I'm here to be respected. When you say no, you're not being rude. You're being real. You're not rejecting love. You're rejecting control. You're not pushing people away. You're making space for the ones who can actually handle you in your fullness. Because real connection isn't built on obedience. It's built on mutual respect. In a healthy relationship, your no is not a deal breaker. It's a dialogue. It's an invitation to understand, to adjust, to grow. The people who truly care won't guilt trip you for setting a boundary. They'll thank you for trusting them with it. But to get to that level of connection, you have to stop apologizing for your no. You have to stop shrinking to fit someone else's comfort zone. You have to get okay with disappointing people who only loved your ability to say yes. Because every time you honor your truth, even if it costs you someone, you are choosing freedom. You are choosing you. And yes, some people will walk away when you stop saying yes to everything. Some will label you as difficult or cold or selfish. But let them talk. Let them go. Because if your truth makes them uncomfortable, to imagine what your full healing will do. The people who leave when you stop performing were never your people. They were just spectators clapping for a version of you that no longer exists. You were not born to live under the pressure of constant agreement. You were not created to be agreeable at all costs. You were made to feel, to think, to choose. And your ability to say no is not a flaw. It's your freedom. So speak your no with your chest. Let it be loud. Let it be uncomfortable. Let it echo through the walls you once built to keep others happy. Because every no you say now is a yes to the version of you that refuses to live in fear. You don't owe anyone endless access to your energy. You don't have to explain your boundaries just to be respected. And you certainly don't need to say yes just to be loved. If your no costs you someone, let it. Because what you're losing is not love, it's control in disguise. And what you're gaining, that's called freedom. And it looks good on you.